Welcome, everybody. I think we're waiting for some folks to hop on. While we're waiting, we'll do a quick intro of us speakers. I'll stop sharing my screen for a second so you can see us.
Yep.
My name is Mike Pastore. I'm a solutions engineer for alliances at Okta, and I'm based out of Chicago. I've been working at Okta for about 2 years. I've been working in security for a little over 5 years, and really excited for today's session today.
And hey guys, my name is Tarun Guhanand. I work here with RAAH Technologies, partner of Okta. But what I do is I'm a principal solution strategist. What that means is I've built identity solutions in the realm of customer, partner, workforce for a variety of different clients across different verticals. So, and my company has been doing that for the better part of the last decade plus, and I have been in this business for the last 7 years. So,
awesome, thanks, Tarun.
Yep.
So yeah, we're really excited to talk today about customer identity. And you'll be hearing, since you're talking to two folks who work day in and day out in identity, we will talk about a lot of identity use cases. Today, though, we're really excited to talk about driving revenue because, you know, in tumultuous economic times, you want to be sure to cut operational costs, but also find ways to drive new revenue, new top line revenue. And customer identity initiatives are a great way to do that. So to start things off, I want to share, you know, a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. About 15 minutes where we're going to talk again about this idea of driving revenue with customer identity and access management. That's what CIAM stands for, customer identity and access management. And then you're going to get to hear Tarun and me talk. We're going to ask each other some questions. It's going to be informal, you know, fireside chat. Really talking about lessons we've learned across different industries to enable you to make better decisions about, you know, how to approach customer identity for your business. And at the end, we'll talk about the value of RAAH, the value of Okta, and how together we can really help companies of all different sizes help with their identity needs. So let's get right into this. This idea of CIAM driving revenue, of customer identity driving revenue. What does that mean? When it comes down to it, it comes down to customer experience. This is a very cool area of security where you're not just doing like back office stuff, keeping like a workforce secure, keeping your customers secure. With customer identity, you're really impacting the customer experience as well. And this is something that tends to surprise folks that are used to traditional security or traditional identity. So I want to share a couple of stats that really show the importance of customer identity and how customer identity or customer experience. This first one's from Gartner. Marketers are saying all over the place that they primarily compete on customer experience these days. It used to be that you could have some differentiated product, that's still the case, of course, or differentiated data. But these days, customer experience is really the differentiator that marketers are focusing on with their companies. And then think about it from the customer angle as well. This is from a Qualtrics report that 94% of customers who rated a company's customer experience is very good were more likely to purchase more in the future. So by focusing on a strong customer experience, what you're seeing here is that you can win repeat business from existing customers. You can increase your customer retention rate. You can decrease your customer churn rate and really build, you know, a strong revenue pipe from existing customers. And the last metric I want to throw up here is really from Bain & Company about companies that really focus on customer experience. They tend to drive revenue 4 to 8% higher than their market average. So these three metrics, by the way, we're going to talk about at the end about some free collateral you can get from both RAAH and from Okta. These are from a white paper on the business value of customer identity. I share these with you to really set the stage for today. That again, customer experience is something to really focus on, and customer identity, by focusing on that, you can really increase the experience for your customers across all the different channels you work with. And that'll be a thread that we talk through throughout this session. So customer experience is important. Customer identity gets you there, but customer identity is hard to get right. And this is where I'm going to throw up some metrics, and I'm going to, you know, ask Tarun for his point of view on some of these as well. The very first one is a metric that about shopping cart abandonment. Or think about when you're, online and you're trying to purchase something, but it takes you way too long to log in or to set up a new account, and you just abandon that experience. You're not alone. Like 83% of consumers have abandoned a purchase because it just takes too long to set up their account or to log in. And Tarun, I'm interested if you've seen this challenge come up with the customers you've worked with as well.
Yeah, a lot of our customers actually end up having, if you did had metrics around it for individual customers, a lot of them come to us because one, their experience is too tedious and they've lost customers in the process of having them sign up. And not just lost them because of their business model or anything like that. It's because customers have choice on the marketplace, right? We're talking about any product pretty much that you can find, there's an alternative. So when you get someone onto your landing page, when you've attracted them with your messaging, the key is to make the experience as smooth and seamless as possible, not just for your customers, but also for corresponding touch points down the line where you're interacting with them through the experience. It's your progressive profiling, your gathering of data and sharing of that data in a way that's transparent to the customer. Customers have choice, so we should give them the choice to work with our businesses in ways that allow them to easily and seamlessly patronize us.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a bunch of next alternatives out there. It's really easy to open up a browser and go to your competition if you're not making it easy for your customers.
Exactly.
Think about from the compliance angle too. I know this is something that Tarun and I talk about quite a bit. It's something companies are often surprised by. GDPR been around for a while. CIAM, California Consumer Protection Act, is also there. I know in Norway we have a biometrics protection law too that's pretty advanced. The trend is that personal data regulations are getting more and more advanced, and businesses need to keep up from that, not just from the compliance angle, but also from the customer expectation angle. And I know, Tarun, that we've talked a lot about, how hard it is to even keep track of all the customer that you have. I don't know if you have anything else to say about, sources or something like that.
Yeah, this is actually very important to talk about, not just in the realm of the changing laws around customer privacy, but we really need to talk about sentiment, right? Because global sentiment these days is around giving less, but getting more. If you look at it that way, customers, people in general, myself included, uh, we want to share less about ourselves, but we still want to be able to get the same value out of every business, every service that we patronize. A good example of that, if you're looking at Apple, right? Apple started putting a whole marketing platform around customer privacy. And I mean, that really resonated with the global public. You had a lot of folks who were struggling with the idea of, oh, we now have to change all of our digital programs to account for the fact that Apple is no longer going to let people use Apple IDs just out as they please. So users now had a choice where they could stop giving consent to use those Apple IDs. And that's just a good example of how now people are realizing that the choice that they've been given is extremely vital in understanding how their data is used and how it's leveraged downstream and within the experience. So privacy is the new frontier, right, of identity, if you think about it, because it's going to be constantly changing um, to fit the global market and customer expectations.
Two more that I want to just bring up to you is, of course, this layer continues to get attacked. This third one here, 61% of all breaches involve credentials. The point here is that so much time goes into keeping this very critical piece of the customer experience safe. And so a lot of people spend a bunch of time just staying on top of the latest vulnerabilities. And it just like takes a lot of time to get right. You need to get it if you do get into the news for losing your customer data or anything that severe repercussions for your level of customer trust and for your business. And so I'll jump to the fourth one here so we can make up time for my technical difficulties. But this last one is about developer productivity. Developers say that they're most productive when they can use the tools they need to get the job done. And so you'll find in customer identity initiatives so many integrations happening. This is something that RAAH has a lot of experience with. We have a bunch of out-of-the-box integrations to help with this as well. But at the end of the day, developers are the ones building these applications, web apps, native apps, these omni-channel experiences. And in order to have quick time to market, developers need to stay productive. They need to scope things properly. And identity is very difficult to scope properly because there's so many hidden components to it. I'm going to build out this slide, but a lot of folks, when they think about logging in, they're like, oh, there's a login box. How hard could that be? We're going to slap our username on it. We're going to put password. Maybe if we're being real fancy, we're going to put Google SSO or Facebook SSO on it. And what development teams often forget about is all the hidden functionality underneath that you really need in the customer identity experience. And Tarun, I know that you have an example of, like maybe a shipping company or some use case where there's a lot of hidden functionality that needs to happen that, folks didn't really think about.
Yeah, and I mean, you can just think about. I have a lot of examples, but I always like to use the old widget adage, right? Where we start talking about the ABC company that builds widgets and they send them out. And an example of that company, you're talking about this company builds all of their own products. They handle the shipping or they work with shipping partners. They handle the processing to actually build custom widgets. So if you're looking at all of that, you have to authenticate your users to log into your service to make their order. That's your order management, right? So they're going to make their order for your widget. They're going to customize their widget. They're going to add all the different things that they want. On top of that, you're looking at the back end processes that have to go into building that widget, all the suppliers that get involved. That's the side of managing all of your supplier and logistics. And those people have identities and their personnel have identities. On top of that, then you move into controlling things like authorization, right? So your customers should be able to only view certain facets of what your product lines have to offer. Your partners have to only be able to view certain product lines and do certain things and operations in those processes that make sense for their rights and roles in those systems. Similarly, for the folks who work on your development teams, like what Mike just said on the previous while he was talking, your developers need to be able to build out programs, both internally and externally facing, but also have roles and regulations in place that allow them to do that in a way that's controlled and is centered on the concepts of privacy, on the concepts of segregation of duties, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's what an identity program should bring. It should bring a uniform view of identity across multiple different touch points, be it for your customer environments, your internal employees and your developers and folks who work with you, or the folks who work at organizations outside of your organization and outside of your customer sphere. So if you look at a business, you're looking at identity and you're looking at customer satisfaction. The three go hand in hand.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you bring up a great point again, why identity tends to start with a small idea and then companies start to realize like, whoa, we have contractors, we have partners, we have employees, we have customers, we have all these different human beings that are interacting with us as a business through technology. So it really helps to have a partner that's done this so many times to help you uncover what should you prioritize on, how should you build today to future-proof your strategy. It can be hard to do, but there have been people that have done it before, so you can really benefit from working with them.
Yes.
Tarun, thanks for that. I want to now move into the stage where we talk live together about challenges we've both seen. I'm going to start off by asking you a question. It's pretty open-ended, just to set the stage. I know that we've talked a bit about employee identity, about partner identity. Let's talk about customer identity and why a company should really care about it. Like with all the things that a company has going on, why should they care about prioritizing customer identity?
And it seems like, and that's a great question, Mike, but it almost seems like that question has been answered over the past few years, right? Just with how the climate has shifted and how we do business, both as individuals and as businesses. Everything's digital. Ever since COVID, especially, everything has shifted to digital. But even before COVID, mobile ordering was becoming big at most retail businesses. And I'm not just talking about picking up your fast food or picking up an order at a store. We're talking about you set appointments mobily, you Stop making phone calls to call centers to manage your healthcare. There's all kinds of things that are happening digitally today that before COVID, you wouldn't have thought of it as a possibility. People are working from home. Everything is happening over the interwebs, right? That's one thing. The second thing is customer expectations are that all of these things happen digitally. So if your business today isn't scaling to fit customer needs where they can reach you at the touch of a button via their phone or their desktop browser or whatever it is, you're going to find that a lot of your customers, like we discussed before, are going to look at alternatives, services that make their lives more convenient and make them more able to patronize those businesses and actually get the value that they need at the touch of a button. So customer expectation is key and the changing global norm is key. Now, the third thing, and this is kind of why customer identity is something that should be scoped in its entirety, is something we really forget is our population at different age groups, different demographics, all of that have different needs. I'll give you a good example. Folks over a certain age, fingerprint scanners, right? Those fingerprint scanners are great for when you have very readable fingerprints. But for a lot of folks over a certain age, fingerprint scanners are not the best way to have a multi-factor authentication experience. A good CIAM solution is going to give you options that allow for all of your populace to have good options to actually prove that they are who they say they are, like text messages or a authenticator application. And this is really for your age group of 60 plus or even below that, right? You have people with visibility and hearing issues, all of that. Your CIAM solution should cover all of the different needs you have for WCAG compliance, for example. All of those different things put together are why a CIAM solution and why customer identity as a whole is extremely important to consider, because caring about customer identity is really just caring about your customer base. It's inadvertently, I know I'm saying that as an identity expert, but inadvertently you're taking care of your customer base, you're increasing your retention because you're able to scale to meet the needs that they have across all of your different populace.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, because I know that we've also spoken before about to talk about a couple of industries where you have to care about different types of people. Healthcare, government, like these are two industries, two sectors where customer identity, or you can call it citizen identity in government, is becoming very important, because governments, state or federal or local, need to give the elderly, young folks who are trying to get their first driver's license, they need to offer digital experiences in a safe, secure way. And the same with hospital systems too. There's such a focus on patient experience, digital front door. I have a friend that just had such a hard time scheduling with specialists because he's going through a hard time. He has to move away from a general practitioner more towards specialists. It takes forever to schedule. And why is that? Because the specialists are like, we know that you're real, like all of our systems are pieces. It frustrates us too. So my point here is that even in situations where there aren't next best alternatives, it's still really important to give your customers, your citizens, a good experience if you love your customers, which any healthy business really should.
Exactly, because they are your whole bottom line, right? At the end of the day. So the bottom line is the customer. So that was a great question, Mike. Now I got one for you, right? One that we hear a lot of times whenever we go to a client or we've met with a client who has a strong development team, or they understand a lot about identity, they understand their business. The question I get all the time is build versus buy, right? Why should someone spend their money on CIAM? Why should they patronize a company like Okta or Auth0 or anything like that when they can just develop a login box and put logic behind it internally? So what's your take on the folks that come to you and say, hey, like I have this expertise in house?
Yeah, I empathize with them, honestly. That's my first, because I've been a developer. I know what it's like to hear like what the product team wants to do and then be like, I have a rough idea. Let me research on Stack Overflow. Let me research on GitHub for a while. Let me see what kind of libraries are out there. I want to save my company money. So, I found an open source package. This is great. We already run on AWS or Azure or GCP. Like, let's do this thing. Let's get it live. So my first response is like, I empathize with them. I see why. Like, why not try to build it? So really, the things to consider is that developers could build it, but there's risk in that. What I often hear is like, hey, we have smart developers, and I know you do. Those developers should really be focused on implementing features that make you a differentiated business. So, one of our customers is Major League Baseball. They had developers. They had a pretty big team of developers that was working on identity all the time. And they finally said, enough is enough. These people need to be working on very cool video content, on like the person experience when you're actually in like at a ball game in the stadium. Like we're in the business of baseball, we're not in the business of identity. So that's
Right.
one thing. Think about the opportunity cost of your really smart developers focusing on identity when they could be focusing on stuff that differentiates you. The other
Yep.
thing too is that identity is pretty notoriously hard to scope properly. Back to that iceberg image that we were looking at before.
Exactly.
And even folks who don't even see the login box, they'll think about social SSO. They might think about user creation, but they oftentimes don't think about all the different data that you need to personalize the experience, or like the marketing tech stack that the marketing team is already invested in that they need to like automate like new lead creation into.
Hmm.
So what tends to happen with customers that I speak to is that they have tried to build it themselves, and they've done it for maybe 6 months or 12 months. And then
Hmm.
they come to us and say, we need to stop. We're staring down a never ending barrel of work that's never going away. And it's getting harder and harder. We need to partner with someone that can take this off our plate. It's kind of, I think about it in terms of like, cloud, that there came a time where server admins were like, enough is enough. Like, we don't
Hmm.
want to worry about managing our workloads and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that angle as well. Like I've talked about keeping your developers focused on your business differentiators, the fact that identity is hard to scope. And then I also want to talk about just the maintenance of it. Like identity is constantly attacked through social engineering, through all these different ways you hear about in the news. It's really hard, especially for small and medium businesses that don't have the resources to stay on top of all of this stuff. It becomes a never-ending fire drill of just trying to keep this very critical part of your experience locked down, but also frictionless. It can sound like a zero-sum game. How do I have security and user experience? It's hard to balance both. And so when folks ask why pay for a CIAM platform, my answer is like your people could be doing a lot more impactful work, but you need customer identity to work as well. So you're stuck in a rock and a hard place. Like where do you want to put
Oh
your
yeah.
really scarce developer hours?
Yeah, and Mike, you brought up some really good points. The one that really resonated with me the most is the MLB example, right? You are not a product company. Your product is the game. The game is what your customers are there to see. They're not
Mhm.
there to see the identity side of things. When you're an Okta, that's what they're there to see, right? So it's the arena you play in is really key here, and the arena that security players play in is the one where we're constantly responding to threats. We're constantly responding to changes in the industry, and that is our whole business ad, right? It's our value. So those were some excellent points.
Thank you. I also like how you threw in the sports pun there with Arena.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
No
All right, I got a
worries.
question for you, Tarun, because I know that RAAH's done a bunch of implementations, migrations. Like you've been boots on the ground. You've had a lot of successful customers and successful implementations.
Hmm.
One question I get pretty often is around migrations,
Yes.
because think about it with customer identity. Like if you already have users stored somewhere, you want to get them into a new system, but you don't want any downtime. Like you don't want to there's a business cost to downtime, especially with
Yeah.
customers. Like if customers can't log in, they're not doing business. So you can put a pretty scary number against that with downtime. So I have a general question around like migrations. Like how have you handled migrations from an old system or many systems to a new one while trying to minimize any impact to the end user?
So Mike, that's a really good question because regardless of what SIAM project you're working on, if you're moving from a platform to another, the data tier is something that is very frequently ignored because folks see that, oh, there's a way to migrate my user, awesome. And then they just move on as part of the RFP process. They don't really scope it well enough. The most key thing with moving your user data is planning. There's two basic strategies you can follow, right? And it depends on the number of users and the size of profiles. So these strategies will vary by business type. But one strategy, and this is for the lower user count or sometimes the higher user count based on how your business works and the amount of data points, is the bulk migration strategy, which it really requires extensive planning. You're basically taking the whole user set and you're saying over X amount of hours, I'm going to migrate X amount of users, right? And when you're looking at past the million user range, you start to look at, okay, how long is this going to take? I have to simulate this. I have to make sure that I'm able to do this in my production environment in a way that minimizes my downtime, or my cutover is so seamless that once I've finished this migration, I can just do synchronization jobs to get the rest of the users in. So my downtime is not the time that it takes to migrate, but it's about like 5 to 30 minutes on average, right? Because even those 30 minutes are critical. And some folks have environments where they can scale in such a way that business doesn't go down at that time, and they have opportunities to, provide discounts to users during those times for any inconveniences, stuff like that. But it comes around planning, and it's not just identity planning, it's planning across your business units, it's planning across the identity team, it's planning with all of the deployment teams that are involved with keeping your business up and running. That's the bulk migration strategy. The second strategy, which is much lower risk, but can go on for an extensive period of time and based on your comfortability with having a migration process that takes a long time, is a lazy migration or a trickle migration. This would say basically every time a user logs in to use your service, a backend solution is in place that's going to say, okay, this user logged in, it was a successful login. Let's take that user and push them into the data store. So with a solution where you're looking at 30, 40 million users and your DAU or your daily active users are like 2 or 3 million, over about 40 days, you'd probably knock out your main business winners, right? The folks that are constantly there, they're regularly using your business, and then you can do the bulk migration strategy for the remainder that don't log in frequently. Um, there's both of these ways can be used interchangeably and together, but it's really based on the size of the business. But the main thing I recommend folks look at is the password hashes. So a lot of the issues that we have had in the past with migrating users is the password migration. If you're using a homegrown solution, it is more often than not a problem, because a lot of homegrown solutions aren't using the industry standard, which today is bcrypt hashes. And these homegrown solutions don't really account for being able to export those hashes, because why would you ever export passwords, right? So no one's actually built a mechanism into exporting those hashes. Same thing for some industry solutions as well. Like I had a case once where I was migrating from Salesforce Identity into a different system, which like an SAP or whatever it was, and SFID just does not migrate hashes. They refuse to do it just on the basis of how they run. So if you have a platform like that, it's important to make sure you're looking at all of the different limitations you'll have around the migration of that data. That's just a couple of things. I'm sure there's more that we could cover, and I could honestly do a whole webinar on
Sure.
migrating hashes because I've done entire calls on migrating hashes. But just at a
Yeah.
high level, there's bulk migration, there's trickle migration. You've got to pay attention to your hashes.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Great point on hashes too. I'd almost forgotten about that, but that's part of the gnarliness where you need a partner that's been around that's can get ahead of those issues and help you with the migration. That's a great point.
Yes, sir. All right.
All
So,
right,
Mike, now I got to piggyback off of that one and ask you a question.
yeah.
So, this one is kind of an interesting one, right? And it's not something that has been around a long time, but let's talk a little bit about partner identity, business to business identity, right? So this is just the case that I get pretty frequently, or a question that we've seen pretty frequently in recent times. And I'm just going to phrase it as a person. So we are a business to business organization. Our customers are large organizations. How do we use an industry leading CIAM solution to build an online program for our customers and their users whose management can be delegated to those organizations? This question is basically around handling everything you would for customer identities for non-business entities, but across all of the different logistics, supply chain
Yep.
entities that go into serving the end customer who could be another business or any of those different interactions in that ecosystem.
Yep.
Do you have some thoughts on how a CIAM solution scales for the B2B side of things?
Yeah, I do. And I can say this is actually a very common question I've been getting. I've been throughout the summer, I've been going to a lot of AWS conferences, and so I've had the
Yeah.
chance to speak to a lot of CTOs, a lot of VPs of engineering, and this question comes up a lot. So if you're going through this too, just know you're not alone. A lot of people are thinking through this. But let me sell the problem statement like Tarun did. I'm a company that's building an application that I sell to other businesses. So think about Atlassian that sells Confluence,
Yep.
Bitbucket to other organizations. And then the user of those apps are the employees of that
Yep.
organization. So if we throw the old consulting alphabet soup at this, it's a B to B to C type scenario.
Yep.
So if I'm building an application as Atlassian, I have two tiers of users. I have the admin users, and then I have the end users. And what I found when I talk to these CTOs and these VPs of engineering is that they're having a really hard time in a couple of ways. One is that they want to make it really easy for the employee who's logging in to see a personalized experience. Like when they log in, they see that they're logging in to Atlassian from company A because they work at company A. Whereas employees somewhere else, when they log in, they should see the personalized experience for company X or company Z. But Atlassian needs to build an easy way to basically deploy code once, but give that personalized experience to all those different employees who might be coming in from different companies. So the personalization side is difficult. And then on top of that, when you're selling to different businesses, you need to make it easy for them to adopt their recent purchase, like on day one.
Yep.
And so what I found is that some companies are having a hard time standing up new environments for new customers. What I see especially is that a company has started selling to startups, and now they're starting to sell to enterprises. Or their sales team is being really productive and starting to sell like to the federal government or to like local government or to healthcare. So these technology teams, their heads are swimming because they're like, oh man, all of these contracts we have to like stay compliant with now. Now we have to find a way to integrate with this company's SSO provider. Like maybe this company is using Okta, maybe they're using Azure AD, maybe they're using something else. We as Atlassian, we as this company need to find a way to integrate with their SSO provider.
Yep.
Or if they don't even use an SSO provider, we need to enable their admins to allow or disallow access. Because again, think about it, as the CTO whose like head is scrambled, they know that licenses will be consumed, but they don't know like who actually works at that company or not.
Yep.
If I'm an employee and I get fired, I should no longer be able to get into this application. But who handles that? That's the actual admin. That's that intermediary person at your customer who should be able to allow access or not allow access because they understand your status as an employee. So another use case I'll bring up is in like real estate, where if you're a real estate conglomerate, your main line of users are landlords. And those landlords manage their properties, but then those landlords manage tenants underneath, like the folks who are
Yep.
actually renting from those properties. So
The
that's
resident
another
portal.
idea where you have to think about like, yeah, resident portal, exactly. And then also a landlord portal and giving those landlords abilities to allow or disallow access to the tenants so that they can actually pay their bills on time. And I won't get too frustrated because my landlord company needs to figure this out. Like I need to call the help desk for the actual application so often, and they're like, I don't know, what's your landlord say? And I'm like, exactly. You guys should be empowering the landlord to help me instead of all the runaround. So the good news is that there, we have a solution for this. But just know that that is a hard problem statement on B2B2C, and that is the next challenging hill that we're running into with customer identity.
Yep.
So to boil it all back up, you need to find a way to make it easy for admin users to integrate with their existing SSO or to manage access for their employees or downstream users. And then you also need to provide a personalized, secure experience for those downstream users to get in with whatever kind of MFA their device allows for and that their contracts require. So you can see why these CTOs are like staying up at night thinking like,
Oh, yeah.
how do I keep pace with my sales team and keep my
Hmm.
CEO happy when I have this mountain of technical debt that I'm staring down? I need like 6 months to squash this before I do new features. We have a
Yep.
solution around that if you want to talk more, but it's a challenging space.
Yep. And Mike, that was also another great answer. And you touched on delegation of administration, which I think for a lot of the folks here is going to be key, right? We're talking about taking something where you're looking at so many different environments with so many different stacks, so many different types of businesses that an organization could work with, and giving them the ability to both administer themselves and use all of your services to better serve your end customers. So how identity enables that is one of the key things that is getting covered today. I was at Gartner and I spoke to a few different potential customers and customers who were talking about how they were looking to push off some of the work that they've been doing to handle all of these complex business relationships because they are not delegating the administration. And the
Mhm.
operational cost of it is severe, right? And if you look at the difference after you've implemented one of these solutions, it's crazy. But Mike, I think you've got a question for me, right? Right after this one.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we have time for two more questions. So I'll ask you one, then you ask me one.
Okay.
But one that I'm interested in is, in financial services, we hear about KYC, know your customer. But even outside of financial services and like government, like how can I make sure that this person that's applying for unemployment insurance isn't committing fraud, that it's an actual person?
Right.
So I have a question for you. Like, how does customer identity help me know my customer better than how I'm doing it today? Broad question, but like, I need to know my customer, and how does customer identity help with that?
So it is a broad question, but I think I can hit some key touch points that kind of cover the identity side of things at least. So let's start at the front door, right? So when your login and registration process is really smooth, the quality of data you can collect is extremely rich. I'll give you an example. If your registration process is capturing your basic information about a user, their email, their password, obviously we're capturing that and hashing it, but the email, password, maybe some preferences, stuff like that based on your business. That's your first touch point. You make it as easy as possible. Your user gets in, they're able to browse your business, see the types of offerings you have, etc. Now, when you have a strong identity layer there, you can not only connect what they're doing in your application to that identity, but you can connect the things that they expressed interest in to that identity. And now that data that you're collecting from in your application that's tied to their identity can be leveraged in downstream systems. So a lot of folks here are probably using Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or they're using Marketo, or a whole bunch of different marketing platforms, right? So when you're looking at that, you have to look at the different downstream integrations that you offer. And we touched on compliance a while back. Compliance and KYC, at least how we've implemented it in the past, go hand in hand. Because if you're looking at GDPR, GDPR is a user's right to be forgotten, right? Is one of the key aspects of GDPR. It's more than that, but that is one of the key aspects of it. Um, if a user was patronizing your business for, say, 5 months and then suddenly decided, I want nothing to do with you, you've collected a lot of data about that user, both from their interactions in app, their purchases, their likes, dislikes, favorites, past orders, etc. GDPR dictates that you have to obliterate pretty much all of that or anonymize some of that data if you're using it for any of the tracking or metrics or measurement of how your programs are functioning. Um, to do that, what's helpful is to have all of those systems integrated with your CIAM provider. Um, in an example like this, you would discontinue the user's interaction from the CIAM side itself. That would kick off a series of processes that would then say, okay, this user is no longer a patron of our business. We need to remove them from all of these systems that are connected instantaneously. So when a user comes back, yeah, you might know of them in a tertiary sense, but they should technically be completely new. And that's how the law works with GDPR, but also CCPA in the United States and many more compliance regulations that are coming around. But KYC, while an opportunity to build very strong profiles and to add a lot of value to customers, can also be a double-edged sword, right? If you don't do it in a way that's responsible and that is really responding to what the market is expecting from you, you can be in a whole lot of trouble. But another thing is also progressive profiling. Now, take aside everything we just talked about with compliance. When you have a user that's loyal, that has been around for maybe like 6 months plus, right? This user is constantly using all your services. You want to be able to not only gather more data to serve them better, but also you want to keep them happy. So understanding where their key touch points are with your business and how to service them with discounts, promotions, loyalty rewards, all of those different programs, while they sound like marketing programs, really start at the identity tier, because without that one single view of a user, you can't understand that John Smith or Jane Doe is the same person across all of these different sites that your business uses. Um, as an example, some businesses have, I always use the widget example, right? You could be selling widgets on one site, you could be selling flowers on the other, you could be selling chocolates on the other, and all of those different sites are still being used by the same John Smith who is across those different touch points. Now, you might know John Smith in three different arenas, but it would be extremely helpful to understand that John Smith is the same John Smith across all of those arenas. Part of KYC is also having a single view of identity that you can leverage to cross-channel market these users. So those are just a few of the things that I think of when I think of how identity can help with KYC.
That's a great, that last point reminds me of one of our customers, Albertsons, who owns a bunch of grocery chains around the US. You might know them as Safeway, you might
Yep.
know them as Victory, but you might know them as Albertsons, but that's the parent company. They had that same issue. They would have people with multiple accounts were building up loyalty points across different systems, would have to remember different passwords or use the same password, which is what people tend to
Yep.
do. And they had to consolidate, and it got them like better conversion numbers and a better user experience across all the different chains that they own.
Yeah, and this is kind of off the cuff, but and I won't mention the grocery chain, but my wife and I recently married. We've been married for 2.5 years, and she had her own points account. It's funny that you bring up a grocery chain. We had to call customer service and spend 20 minutes on the phone to get all of our points and loyalty and everything merged into a single account. And we only have one account, but we have to access it as both of us owning that account. I'm not going to mention who the chain is because that would be embarrassing, but it
Yeah,
is something that, like, as a customer, I see that and I say this is an opportunity.
yeah,
So, but again, it's a lot of customers would be disenfranchised by that, but when you provide that functionality for your users, it makes everything seamless.
yeah, yeah. That's great.
So I
Um,
have one last question for you, Mike. I think we only have time for one more. You willing to
yeah,
jump into another one?
yeah. Hit me with it.
All right. So this one is key, right? And I think we have a lot of folks that will watch this or who are watching this right now who come from a background of workforce identity. Because that's the more common side of identity. If you've been entrenched in the identity space for a while, you've done a lot of work with Active Directory environments, you've done a lot of work with your internal identity products, IDPs, etc. And suddenly maybe you've been told, okay, we need somebody to help us build our digital program. We need them to help us build a CIAM program. So, Mike, some of the questions those folks would have, right, is what are some of the similarities they can take from their workforce experience into that new program? And what are the differences, the things that they really need to understand and consider that they wouldn't have necessarily considered as part of the workforce side of things that they've been used to for so many years?
Yep, yep. I like this one. Yeah, there are similarities and there are quite a few differences. I'm going to focus on the differences, but to start with some of the similarities, like if you've worked in traditional identity, like workforce employee identity, you're already familiar with like MFA, the importance of that, the importance of password syncs, or trying to minimize the risk of passwords, integrations into applications and resources that your employees need to use day to day. Those are some of the similarities, but there are important differences too. Like, let's talk first about like user account creation. This is a pretty important one. In workforce identity, a user account gets created when that person gets hired, like a new employee joins. And so, the AD team like puts them in Active Directory, the HR team puts them in the HR system. Those teams are probably spending a lot of time just staying in sync with one another. Those systems should be more integrated. But at the end of the day, like this employee has gone through all this upstream process, background check, credit check, rounds of interviews, where so many people have said like, yeah, this person's good. And then the user account gets created. Whereas on the customer side, you want to get as many customers as possible, but limit fraud, like limit people signing up with someone else's information. Unemployment fraud was happening right when COVID hit across a lot of state governments.
Ah, yeah.
We're like, you know what? I'm going to sign in with Mike Pastore's information because I swiped his ID and his credit card. This system's not checking that I am who I say I am. So you need to add more technical controls in for identity proofing, while also making it as frictionless as possible. So user account creation is one of the main differences. It's much more streamlined, and you have to be open for a lot of different complexities with customer identity. And that comes to my second point too around MFA, like presenting different types of MFA based off accessibility. Like Tarun brought up the example of like some elderly not being able to use fingerprint as much, or like the integrity of their fingerprints is not as strong as it used to be. So offering them other options. You'll still see SMS in customer identity. I think that'll start going away more and more as MFA automated attacks with one-time passwords get more and more advanced. But you will see biometric continue to be important. And based off what the end user's device allows for, giving them a way to add that extra level of protection, but being flexible with what the end user actually gets prompted for. And last point I'll talk about is like similar to the account creation side, but user migrations, user stores.
Mm.
When you're migrating from an older system to a newer system for workforce, you have maybe your old IDP, or you have Active Directory, you have your HR system. That's about it.
Yep.
With customer identity, Tarun was mentioning before too, like this information around customers is built up across, no joke, like hundreds of different databases, all
Oh,
these
yeah.
different applications, which to his earlier point makes like compliance with GDPR a whole mess as well, like how to anonymize all those different places. So the migration gets much more advanced and gnarly because there's so many different user stores that you have to really think through normalizing like the ideal profile of a user. That becomes part of the path that a partner can really help advise on, is like, what is the user profile we want as we do this migration? So
Yep.
3 points right there that are some main differences.
Yeah, and I think those are key to consider because I mean, and everything we've talked about kind of ties into itself, right? Some way, shape, or form. There is some crossover with workforce complexity and customer complexity, and someone who's worked in workforce is really going to be well prepared to tackle a customer program. But there are certain things that are simpler, and as Mike said, certain things that are far more complex. And tracking down the systems in the wild where user data resides is one of those complexities that is just it's something where, just like with workforce identity, you need to get everybody involved and there needs to be buy-in to understand why the program makes sense and why it needs to why you need everybody to succeed. Same thing for customer identity. Buy-in across all of your different channels that are servicing this program is key. So thank you, Mike, for touching on that. But I think we're out of time for questions. So um, should we move
Yeah,
to
let's
talking
talk a little
about some of
bit.
the values?
Yeah, because I mean, we've been really painting a picture for how hard this is, but it's clearly not impossible because there are
Yep.
companies out there that are solving this, increasing their revenue, lowering their risk. So let's talk about how RAAH and how Okta can help out folks who are, thinking through customer identity initiatives.
Yep.
And we'll start with RAAH.
So just a little bit about RAATech, right? So like I said before, I'm a principal solution strategist. I work on all of the different solutions that we built for customer facing environments, for partner environments, and for workforce environments. Now, let it be known, I am one of many, right? So if you enjoyed hearing me speak today, my expertise is across pretty much our entire team. Our folks have serviced customers in multiple different verticals. We've led a number of implementations across complex use cases, different business environments. we have a diverse set of experience that can help fulfill any need, be it in your most trying of environments like healthcare or something really like just more so customer facing like retail. We cover all the nuts and bolts. So that's my quick pitch on what we do. But we also, then like I said, we work in B2E, which is your workforce identity solutions. We work in B2B partner identity, which Mike and I discussed lightly here, which we could do a whole webinar about later. And we also focus on B2C solutions, which was the majority of what we talked about, and all of these different back-end processes that go into building a customer program, and all of your downstream integrations, any third-party integrations that you have, and all of that really coming together with the identity ecosystem to build out this value add for customers that keep them coming back and keep them there when they are there. And just to kind of branch off of that, right? We talked a lot about how identity impacts multiple different business units. So this white paper that RAAH published a while back is kind of speaking to the different types of people that are affected and should understand identity and the different ways that they should see it. So the identity pro would be the person who's worked in a lot of enterprise environments, maybe touched some customer facing environments. The jack of all trades is going to be your guy who is, or girl who is in these environments, working on databases, working on networks, working on a bunch of stuff, and they just got slapped with an identity project, and now they got to know where to go. But they're so skilled that they're going to figure it out, right? The hacker averse, your mom and dad, maybe, or somebody who is watching the news a lot, and they're seeing like Colonial Pipeline, they're seeing this T-Mobile stuff, everything that's popping up on the headlines of data breaches, and they're really concerned with how it impacts them. And then there's the marketer, and we've discussed them at length even during this conversation. They're an important part of an identity program because they are the ones who benefit and build the most value for the business using these customer identities, or even for enabling them to do their work as a workforce identity. There's all these different types of people. Everybody subscribes to identity in some way, shape, or form. And this white paper kind of gives you a high level and slightly low level view of how all these parties interact and should interact together and separately to understand how identity impacts businesses across the globe.
Yeah, this is why I'm excited about RAAH. They have so much experience with stakeholder management, with like making sure you got your ducks in a row, that you're thinking through not just the challenges today, but preventing even more challenges 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road.
Exactly.
They've got proof in the pudding that they've done this well. So they're a great partner to work with. Yeah, I'm here representing Okta. So we have thousands of organizations around the world, all different types of industries. As you can tell from our discussion today, every company out there has identity opportunities that they can really focus on to make their business better. The employee side, the partner side, the customer side that we talked mostly about today. And we really help them. Like, we have a flexible platform that lets them connect their people to their resources. Think about zero trust, the right people getting the right level of access to the right resources at the right time. We have a flexible platform that helps partners like RAAH, helps like identity first companies really set things up, kind of set it and forget it, get a system up and running, maintain it as you need to, improve it without needing to put a whole bunch of money and time into actually getting the thing implemented and keeping the thing on. So we have a bunch of identity use cases that we help with. At the end of the day, why Okta? We help you get to market faster. We help you build an experience that gets you ahead of your competition, shows continued innovation to your customers. We improve onboarding for your customers, and then we reduce the risk for those hacker averse. And we're near the end of time, but I want to leave you with this white paper as well. If you Google Okta customer identity business value, you'll get a bunch of metrics like those earlier in this discussion, which will help you build a business case, or at least understand the potential business value that you could get from focusing on customer identity. And I'll leave this up here as we close out, but just a couple of bullet points that why we're so excited to work together here. We have a bunch of joint customers that have really benefited from our work together, and we hope that you've learned something interesting today that you chew on for the rest of the day. So,
Yeah.
Tarun, thank you so much for talking with me today and for sharing
Yeah,
knowledge.
for sure. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time. It was great.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining.